In the heartland of America, amongst the idyllic forests and quiet towns, there are stories that are not meant for tourists. They are dark secrets rooted in the soil itself. What happened in the woods of Allegan County, Michigan, forced generations to hide the truth behind an absurd legend of monsters. But the monsters were real, and they were human. Saugatuck, Michigan. It presents itself as a postcard come to life. An artist colony nestled on the shores of Lake Michigan, renowned for its pristine beaches, vibrant art galleries, and quaint bed and breakfasts. It is a town that thrives on its reputation as a peaceful, tolerant, and welcoming escape. But this polished veneer, so carefully maintained for the tourist trade, conceals a persistent, dark folklore. To find it, you must leave the bustling town center and drive inland, where the roads narrow and the woods thicken around the historic Felt Mansion. The mansion itself is a monument to the Gilded Age, an opulent summer home built by inventor Dorr E. Felt. Local lore, however, often casts a shadow on the estate, suggesting its grandeur stood in stark, silent indifference to a great suffering that occurred nearby. For just beyond its manicured lawns, in the deep woods, the air grows heavy, weighted by unspoken history. It is here that the legend of the Melon Heads is whispered. This was the early 20th century, a time of immense industrial progress, shadowed by a chillingly pragmatic belief in eugenics. It was a period where science was sometimes used to justify the marginalization of those deemed unfit. In this environment, private institutions, funded by wealthy patrons and shielded from public scrutiny, became the perfect places to hide away society's inconvenient secrets. The legend insists that one such secret was the Junction Insane Asylum, a facility methodically erased from the maps, but not from memory. Official archives of Allegan County contain no mention of a Junction Insane Asylum. No blueprints, no ledgers, no formal existence, but history is more than ink on paper. It survives in the stories people tell. And the collective memory of the region points to this private facility specializing in one particular type of patient, children with hydrocephalus. This medical condition, causing a painful and dramatic enlargement of the cranium, made them outcasts in an era obsessed with physical perfection. They were the hidden children, the family secrets sent away to be forgotten. The legend of the Melon Heads is not a single narrative, but a chilling mosaic of anecdotal encounters. One of the most retold stories comes from the late 1950s. A young couple's car allegedly stalled on a secluded road bordering the old Felt property. As dusk settled, they heard what sounded like children giggling from deep within the trees. The sound was distorted, however high-pitched yet guttural, an unsettling mimicry of joy. Peering into the growing darkness, the man claimed he saw movement, several small figures darting between the trees with an unnatural agility. Their silhouettes were unmistakable, defined by disproportionately large, round heads. A palpable sense of being watched, of territorial hostility, washed over them. They abandoned the car and fled down the road, not daring to look back. Another tale, often told by older residents, involves a farmer in the 1960s. He began finding things on his property that unnerved him. First, it was the footprints, small, almost childlike, but with an odd gait, always leading from and back to the densest part of the woods. Then came the discoveries of small, crudely made effigies woven from twigs and twine, hanging from low branches. They seemed like warnings, territorial markers. The final straw was the night he heard tapping on his windows, a frantic, irregular rhythm that moved from one side of the house to the other. He saw nothing but fleeting shadows in the moonlight. He sold the northern half of his land the following year. Even a former deputy sheriff, speaking anonymously for a local history project in the 1980s, recounted a call in the early 70s. A woman reported prowlers on her property, describing them as deformed children. The deputy responded, finding nothing but an eerie silence. As he was leaving, his headlights swept across the tree line, and for a split second, he saw a small, pale face with massive, dark eyes and a strangely oversized head, vanishing back into the darkness. He filed it as unfounded, but admitted the image never left him. These tales of feral beings become terrifyingly coherent when contextualized with the rumored events at the asylum. It was allegedly run by a doctor who viewed his patients not as children needing care, but as biological subjects. The lore speaks of a dehumanizing daily routine. Children were referred to by number, not by name. Communication was forbidden. The goal was to break any sense of individual identity. The treatments were barbaric. Experimental surgeries to reduce cranial pressure performed with rudimentary tools, isolation in dark rooms for days on end, and a regimen of psychological abuse that fostered paranoia and aggression. It's said the staff turnover was high. Few could stomach the work for long, leaving only the most callous to care for the children. The end of the Junction Asylum was not a moment of liberation, but the final act of abandonment. There was no uprising, no fire of righteous fury. It was a quiet, administrative death. By the mid-20th century, the political and scientific winds had shifted. Eugenics was disgraced, and state oversight of medical facilities grew stricter. The asylum's funding likely dried up, its wealthy benefactors quietly severing ties to a venture that was now a liability. The final day would have been eerily silent. The remaining staff, paid their final wages, would have simply locked the front gate from the outside, leaving the inner doors unlocked. For the children inside, this silence would have been the first sign of change. Imagine one of them, a boy of 10, who had never seen the sky without bars in front of it. He would have felt the absence of routine, the lack of footsteps in the hall. Driven by hunger or a burgeoning curiosity, he would push open a door that was never opened before, and then another, until he stood at the threshold of the building. The sensory overload would have been immense. The feeling of wind, the smell of damp earth, the cacophony of birdsong, all alien and terrifying. He would be joined by others, a small, scared group, blinking in the unfiltered sunlight. Their first steps into the forest would not have been a joyous escape, but a terrified stumble into an incomprehensible, hostile world. Their survival in those first weeks is the legend's missing chapter. They would have learned by instinct, foraging for food, finding shelter in hollow logs and caves, their shared trauma the only bond they had. Their aggression toward outsiders wasn't born of malice. It was the learned response of creatures who had only ever known humans as a source of pain. Today, the forest has reclaimed everything. Any physical evidence of the Junction Asylum is gone, swallowed by decades of unchecked growth. This erasure feels deliberate. Were records lost in an accidental fire at a county and clerk's office? Were families paid to maintain their silence? These are the questions that still haunt local historians. The truth was systematically buried, and in its place, a ghost story was allowed to grow, a far more palatable and less legally culpable version of events. The Felt Mansion still hosts weddings and tours, a monument to an era's wealth, completely divorced from the poverty and pain that festered just beyond its view. The legend of the Melon Heads has become a bizarre cultural artifact, a thrilling tale for a dark night. But it's more than that. It is a scar on the landscape, a distorted echo of a real human tragedy. It's a testament to the fact that when a truth is too terrible to be documented, it seeps into the soil and reemerges as folklore. It ensures that what happened is not entirely forgotten, even if it is no longer truly remembered. The next time you hear a strange local legend, listen for the undertones of truth. History is full of monsters, and most of them, tragically, look just like us.